I've spent the last week reading through the stack of 80s and 90s Marvel and DC. These are books that my oldest son, who also has a comic book gene, picked up at a show in February, and he was like, "Hey, why don't you go read these?" And I initially didn't really want to read them because I've read these books or some of these books from this era, and there's a reason why I stopped reading comics in the mid '90s. Joined about 6, 7 years after I stopped reading. But he asked me again, "Hey, did you get a chance to read them?" So I didn't want to lie. I said, "Yeah, I read them." Um, so I went ahead and read them and thought I'd share some thoughts and see if it's better or worse or about what I expected. So first is, what if the Fantastic Four had lost the trail of Galactus? This came out in 1990, written by Roy Thomas. I'm not a huge fan of Roy Thomas's work. Roy Thomas is from that school of there are never enough words on a page in comics. And he does this a lot with like really good artists like John Buscema. Just has to fill it up with words. Now, the story itself is okay. Of note, though, that this is early work from Greg Capullo. It's interesting to see his style. I mean, his style is pretty clean. It's not bad work at all. But it's just amazing that this is the guy that eventually goes on and has a very long run on Spawn, and then has a very notable run on Batman with Scott Snyder. And then he has then he goes on to do Death Metal, and he's tied to that. He had a very long, successful run with DC. So it's just interesting. I like these thin lines and how clean it is, and it's not overdrawn. And it's different, but it's still good. So it's pretty good effort from him early on. Next is The Amazing Spider-Man Soul the Hunter. I guess this is a sort of like a epilogue to the Craven Last Hunt story. This story is all over the place. It really kind of makes no sense. You don't know if it's a ghost story. You don't know if everything's in Peter's head. It's just really weird. And I'm not a huge fan of Mike Zeck. I know Mike Zeck had a long career, and I'm not knocking him, but I just never thought that his work was all that great. But I mean, I met him at a con. He was pretty cool. But it's weird. I guess this is when he switched back to the red outfit, but he's flashbacking to the black outfit. And this is also, if I'm not mistaken, 1992. So this is when everybody was drawing like the Image guys, the Image founders. Pretty forgettable. Okay, next is X-Men Alpha Flight 1 and 2. This is a mini-series. And I remember that I stopped reading X-Men in the 80s when this was going on. Because Chris Claremont's another guy that subscribes to There's Never Enough Words, but instead of doing it in narration like Roy Thomas and Stan Lee used to do, he does it in dialogue, and there's just so much soap opera dialogue. It lost my interest back then. But this is when Paul Smith was still doing the book. Apparently, this was a 2-issue miniseries that was done during his time with the X-Men, but then it was published after he left. So I was excited because Paul Smith really rejuvenated this book after he took over for Dave Cockrum, after Dave Cockrum took over for John Byrne. But again, this is just all this soap opera stuff where, I mean, people complain about the plot for Captain America, the Winter Soldier, but this is the same thing where there is some moral dilemma and the superheroes involved have opposing sides and they can't come to agreement. So even though they've been living together, working together, fighting together, dying together, they have to fight. This is a long story, and the worst part is that because it's an exercise issue, it's double-sized, it just gives more panels and more pages for Chris Claremont to fill up with words. And it's a shame because, Paul Smith can do some really beautiful work. He really rejuvenated this book. And it's just on and on and on and on and on. And it's just like, again, it's like a soap opera from the 80s. But it wasn't even like a cool soap opera. And I loved how dated some of the stuff is. Like, this is Rachel Summers' costume. She's wearing a jazzercise leotard with like no leggings, and then she's got these long ass like leg warmers. Like, how are you gonna fight in that thing? I mean, I know it's done for cheesecake purposes, but still, it's like really, really weird. As I said, Paul Smith can draw really well. Bob Wiacek, who did the inking, knew how to ink his work, didn't muddle it up. Really good artist. It's just a shame that Chris can't just let these guys storytell and have to fill in. I mean, this is one of the few panels where he lets Paul Smith just tell the story without a ton of words. You know, this is Paul Smith's strong suit. He was just really good. So, I'm reminded again of why I don't read Chris Claremont books anymore. Iron Man Annual, number 7. This is just an annual story. It's about a supervillain, Power Man, who, you know, has been losing to increasingly lower powered heroes. This is when James Rhodes took over the full Iron Man suit, and he's trying to get his own power back so that way he can be a top line villain again. And it's just your regular fill-in annual story. It's not like before, when you had annuals, they would actually like be a cool story. And then this was published in '84, but sometimes they're just like, hey, you know, we just need to sell an extra book for an extra inflated price. We'll give you more pages. This is okay. This is Spider-Man, Punisher, and Sabretooth, Designer Jeans, published in 1993. This is, my son got this because he said he wanted to see what kind of implausible, crazy story could get these guys together. And that's about a good description. Terry Cavanaugh's a writer, Scott McDaniel's a penciler, Keith Williams is the inker. Just Peter Parker blows something up. It leads to Sabretooth joining, and all of a sudden the Punisher comes in and does what he does best, just big explosions and killing people. You know, you have your requisite Spider-Man and Punisher moral arguments where Spider-Man is like, you know, you and I don't like the way you do business, but then they'll work together. And then you have Sabretooth join in, and he's really not the villain. He's actually like part of the story, but he's really not much in the story. And this is when you could put Sabretooth in a comic and it would sell. Like, in theory, putting the Sabretooth, Punisher, and Spider-Man in a comic, you know, the only thing you could have done in this era to make it even more sellable was putting Ghost Rider in. It's okay. I mean, at least this read pretty quickly as opposed to this, because these books with all that bad dialogue and the extra pages, these books just were like a slog in waist-high mud. Well, this was a really good story. This is Batman 1990 Annual. Nice, beautiful cover by Neil Adams. Andy Halford did the writing. Chris Sprouse did the pencils. And this, I think from the research I did, this was Chris Sprouse's second professional work ever. And I said, I know that name. And then I realized, you know, after doing some digging, that eventually 10 years after this, him and Alan Moore would win Eisner's for Tom Strong. And this is the origin of Two-Face. And this is drawn with the small bat ears. It's made to be look like Batman Year 1, Batman Year 2. James Gordon and Bruce Wayne still don't have that relationship that they're known for. I like the work. It's a good long story, and I like this story because I always like it when Batman is forced to be a detective instead of just coming in and just, this person, he's weak, I will do this kick to stop him. And, you know, and then, you know, and either find the Joker or the Scarecrow or something. I mean, this is more of Batman being a detective, which is one of the reasons why I like the Matt Reeves film so much, because I like that aspect of the character. And that used to be something that was more, I guess, written more about. And then over the years, after Dark Knight Returns, they just realized, hey, look, Batman, people just want to see Batman, you know, being people within an inch of their lives. And so that's what they really focused on. But again, I like these more detective stories. I I think they're harder to write and they take a little bit more talent, because I think it's easier just to like, hey, we're gonna throw these guys together, we're gonna have to beat the hell out of each other, and then we're gonna end things. But I mean, I like these panels composition where it's just you're doing the zoom in like in a movie. It's just really nice. It's a nice book. It's a good story. If you find this like in a dollar bin or 50-cent bin, I would definitely pick it up. And again, rest in peace, Neal Adams. Neal Adams cover 1990. This is good stuff. Okay. What If X-Men, the wedding album. So this is what if Scott Summers and Jean Grey had married earlier. This is an okay story, not terrible. You can tell it's early 90s. Just by 1994, you can tell it's early 90s by the story, and also you can always tell by the composition, because in the early 90s, they always had the female characters always spread open, like they always had them spread open, like they were doing these like low angle shots with their legs spread open. Like it's not even cheesecake, it's like beyond cheesecake. And these shots from like up above, I mean, this stuff was targeted to horny teenage boys, and the Image guys proved you can make a lot of money doing it. And even when they were at Marvel, you can make a lot of money doing it, so everybody did it. And not really script. Yeah, you can tell this is an early 90s Marvel comic. Only thing of note is that this was early work from Kurt Busiek. Ron Randall's not a bad penciler, and Art Nichols, he did inking. This is after he did the Magnus Robot Fighter art for the first 8 issues or so when they launched that series in Valiant under Jim Shooter. I liked his work. Okay. Marvel Team Up, Spider-Man, Fantastic Four. Dr. Faustus is the enemy. Not a bad story, but for me, what I enjoyed is seeing Sal Buscema's pencils. I'm a big fan of his art. I think he had that legendary Hulk run. I think he's good for like big battles, and there's that classic Sal Buscema thing where somebody has their mouth open and there's that line of spittle, and it's just that white line. I mean, there's a million panels of the Hulk during his run like that, but it's really effective. You see other guys do it, trying to do it, but it never just really works. It doesn't look the same, but you can tell they got the idea from him. But again, they're fighting Dr. Faustus, and he's playing his mind games. Okay book, not terrible. This is The Triumph of Hugo Strange, Batman Annual, number 10 from 1986. Doug Monk, Dennis Cowan, Alfredo Alcala. I like Dennis Cowan, and Alfredo Alcala to me is one of these underrated guys. The story is basically, I think, a continuation of another story in the regular comics. This is when I think DC and sometimes Marvel would actually have these as like part of the actual story, so you'd like be compelled to buy it instead of just being this one shot. And basically somebody's buying up all the stock in Wayne Foundation, and Bruce Wayne, then the stock price has gone down, Bruce Wayne is broke, and slowly but surely somebody's trying to like destroy Bruce Wayne's fortune. He ends up being broke. Bruce Wayne is actually, the house is possessed to settle his debts. He has no money. So there's this funny sequence where he has $37 in his pocket. Okay, this is 1990, so it has a little more purchasing power. So he doesn't know what to do, so he goes to the store, he buys a hot plate, and then he like finds some place to stay. And he's like got nothing, he's like broke. But then, he tries to like figure out like, how am I gonna prove my innocence and get back to my fortune? And just seeing this scene of Batman dragging this old mattress with a hobo bag in the bag. I guess it is his cape. Dragging his stuff to like a church choir so he can like live in the belfry. It's just funny. I mean, it's just kind of funny. Like, you don't expect to see Batman just like being like a hobo. But it's not a bad story. The art's pretty decent. Art's pretty good, actually. I liked it because, you have two guys that are long, established pros doing it. So this is okay. I mean, if you see this in the 50-cent bin, I'd pick it up. This is What If the Hulk Went Berserk. Now, originally, I told Chris, buy this because it had a Bill Sienkiewicz cover, and I had this rule of thumb that if I'm in the dollar bin, 50-cent bin, and I see one of these old Marvel books with a Bill Sienkiewicz or a Barry Windsor Smith cover, I buy it, just for the cover. So this is 1994. This takes place shortly after the Hulk becomes, Bruce Banner becomes the Hulk, but instead in this time, Rick Jones and the Hulk don't both make it into, Rick Jones doesn't make it into the trench, they're both exposed, and so somehow they're mind linked, and events happen, and eventually the Hulk just becomes Berserk. Rick Jones dies, Hulk becomes Berserk, and he's unstoppable. So like the military is so desperate, they're like, hey, we need to call in some help. So they actually call in the Fantastic Four, and this is very early in their career. So they call them in, and they fight the Hulk, and the Hulk just beats the crap out of them. So then, on the news, Don Blake, with Kane, says, I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to fix it. And then he's flying, he sees Iron Man, the old yellow outfit, and they're like, oh, are you Iron Man? Or I guess you're Thor, or whatever. So he fights Iron Man, he just kills Iron Man, and then Thor fights him. And then the crazy thing is that, they're locked in battle. He's like, oh, the only thing I can do is this. And he just snaps his neck and just kills him. Like, oh, they went there. It's okay, but again, these covers are just brilliant covers. So anytime I see one of these things, I buy it. I'll just buy it for the cover. I don't cut out the cover, but, you could. This is an issue 121 of Peter Parker's Spectacular Spider-Man. This is sort of like a Rashomon story. I'm not sure who did the cover. I looked up the credits for the cover, and I got 3 different credits. So I don't know who it is. Just seeing J. Jonah Jameson with an assault rifle, not assault rifle, but high-powered type of rifle. It's just funny because here's Spider-Man swinging action. Here's Mary Jane just sitting there looking hot. And then there's J. Jonah Jameson just blasting somebody. It's just okay. So they do this Rashomon thing where there's a bank robbery that all 3 of them go to when they're at the bank, and they all each have a different story. And of course the first 2 stories are whack because they make each other look great, and then the third one, the one told by Peter, that's the closest one to the truth. And so it's a fill-in story. But then when I got to the end and I saw the credits, this blew me away. Peter David writes a story. Peter David, long career. I like Peter David's work. He does superheroes very well. Also did Star Trek very well. But the pencils, the layouts are done by John Romita Sr. and John Buscema. And the inks are Bob McLeod, Alan Kupperberg, Keith Williams, and Mark Texeira. But I'm thinking you got John Romita Sr. and John Buscema just to kind of do layouts for this fill-in issue, and I'm thinking, man, those guys are Marvel Titans, superhero comics Titans, and it's yeah, we need you to fill in this 1-page story, 1986, and it's just what are they doing here? It's when you see a great music act in this little venue, and you're like, what are you doing here? And this ad is interesting. This is almost 40 years ago. Yeah, we all know the universe was not Jim Shooter's best idea, and we know it's still a meme, and guys that were around there still crap on this. And I know it's still a Marvel trope to bring Starbrand into a comic just to have him die the same issue. It's okay, I know you guys hated Jim Shooter, and maybe a lot of those reasons are justifiable, but at some point it's just let it go. But yeah, this was, it's ironic seeing this, and it's yeah, knowing what you know now, it's yeah, that ain't gonna make it. The last one was Punisher Batman. This is by Chuck Dixon, John Romita Jr., Klaus Johnson. On art, and Christy, I'm going to say Scheel or Scheel as colorist. I apologize, Christy. This is your standard Chuck Dixon, Punisher, and John Romita Jr. does this thing where he does that inverted, like, orientation. This is kind of story, Punisher's in Gotham, he hates Gotham, and then of course you have Batman doing the same thing. He hates Gotham and he's looking for Jigsaw, and Batman is like, I've heard of this guy doesn't play by my rules. So eventually, of course, the Joker comes in here, and this is like your typical Chuck Dixon story. Punisher's killing a lot of goons. The only thing with these intercompany books is that you have them work together. You can't really have them fight each other, because it's sort of like if two wrestling federations got together, each one wants their guy to look strong. So therefore nobody looks strong. So you, at the point is the Joker tries to escape, Punisher catches him. And this is what I mean by saying that nobody ends up being strong, because Punisher catches him, Punisher with like that huge chest. And he's about to he puts a gun to Joker, he's about to blow him away, and then Batman's like, that's enough. And Batman's basically saying, we don't do things this way in Gotham. And he tells the Joker, run for your life. So he lets the Joker go run. And so, Punisher just drops his gun, he gets so pissed, he just punches Batman. And then Batman's like, I gave you one shot. And then, they leave, and the Punisher says the best thing. He says, you and that giggling idiot deserve each other. Yes, they do. And then he just leaves. He's like, I hate Gotham. So you have the story where there's killing a bunch of people, and then Batman and Punisher have this morally opposed ideology, because Punisher uses terror and bullets to in the pursuit of justice, and Batman uses terror and fancy equipment, terror and justice. But when he's about to get rid of his worst enemy ever, a true psychotic guy who's been responsible for killing thousands of people, it's like, well, we didn't do it, we're not doing it my way, so I'm gonna let you go. I mean, really? It just seems really stupid, especially when this book came out. I mean, I know they gotta keep the Joker living forever, but I mean, it just seems kind of stupid. Like 1994 again. I mean, the art's good. I mean, for what it is, nobody has a body like this. But I mean, John Romita Jr., he's consistently good. I like his work. I haven't liked it the last few years, but I met him at a con. He was a really cool guy, really good with the fans. So yeah, I was reminded a lot of why I didn't stop reading Marvel and Image comics. I started reading comics in the mid-90s, from like 95 to 2001. I didn't realize that DC, though, was still making comics for the most part the old school way. And then you had later on in the late 90s, books like The Long Halloween that came out. But yeah, this is a regrettable period in comics. That's it. Bye.